Welcome back to Ahead of the Game. It is Tux Sport Takes, Ryan, the host of today's show. And with me, it's not Sports Pez Jez, because he's got a big, can you say frog? It's probably not a frog in his throat, but something else. But it's deep, deep down there. The dude can't talk. So I brought my main man, Josh Higgins from the Basketball Fix, NBL expert, over to this Ahead of the Game episode. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Ryan. Obviously, I was about to say Jez there. I was about to start talking a bit of crap about Jez right there. But yes, mate, I had to fill in once again for Jeremy. It's been a bit of a regular occurrence on our other podcast there at the Basketball Fix. He's always constantly on holidays, or he's constantly got something wrong with his throat. So maybe he's going to have to change a few lifestyle habits as well down the track, mate.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. I was saying to you before and put it out there. He was sounding a bit off yesterday, but then he rang me this morning, and it's like, dude, yeah, you're not getting on the show with that voice. You sound like one of those shazzes down the pub. Smoked 50 cigarettes a day and 14 glasses of wine. It's not a good podcast voice.
You might be on your way to a little sponsorship from some Marlborough Reds or some Winnie Blues, mate, potentially, if you keep talking like that,
mate. We don't condone smoking on the show, but we condone drinking. That's fantastic.
That's it.
But, Josh, so good to have you on here, and especially for this episode, because tomorrow, Saturday, first game of the NBL Grand Final Series, and these Illawarra Hawks, their baby. How does it feel? You follow and you're part of the basketball kind of landscape from a media perspective. How does it feel for you now with the end of the season here in the Grand Final Series?
Yeah, it's exciting, mate. It's exciting for a couple of reasons, I guess. First and foremost, we get to sort of take a little bit of a back step as well in obviously terms of everything that we're doing and all the work and everything like that. And we get to just enjoy a little bit of action. And I'll probably tune in a bit more to the NBA because that's the time of the year that the NBA starts to really pick up with their final series as well. But I guess that's from after the season finishing in that sort of perspective. But this is the pinnacle. This is why we play 27 home and away games. This is why we play a final series. We play a play-in tournament, semi-finals and everything like that. You figure out who the best couple of teams are. And, you know, realistically, I know we go through all these different scenarios with these play-in tournaments, these semi-final appearances and everything like that. But we've genuinely got the two best teams in the league fighting for an NBL championship because Melbourne United have probably had a great start to the season. If you look back at their season, it was incredible. Had a really weird patch towards the middle of the season. They sort of got going later in the season. But the Illawarra Hawks were pretty strong all season long. They didn't really tinker too much, but they didn't really outperform expectations as well through that middle part. So it's a really interesting grand final series, and I'm looking forward to breaking it down with you very shortly, mate.
How we were watching the Perth and United game, and it would be not a great episode ahead of the game if we don't mention the Perth Wildcats, given your supporting of them. But how did it feel watching? Because like Perth were the underdogs, and they were right there. And maybe not. I know you expected them to be there, but a lot of people didn't expect them to be there right at the end of the game, and it was right within the grasp, and then it was taken away. How did you feel as a supporter in that moment?
Oh, mate, I was probably the most vulnerable I've ever been as a supporter of any club. Like, that was probably the most excited I've been. You know, I've watched the West Coast Eagles, you know, perform at the highest level and win grand finals and obviously lose grand finals as well. But I think I genuinely had such a belief that the Perth Wildcats were going to make this year's grand final after nearly 10 years out of not making a grand final series. And it's been a while. And, you know, when I was growing up, it was pretty unordinary for the Perth Wildcats to not be in a grand final series. So to have this little bit of a run over these last, you know, sort of 7 to 8 years where we haven't made a grand final series, it has been quite a struggle. So I think there was a big part of me in which was just excited. And when Jesse Wagstaff hit that 3-point shot after 3 offensive rebounds, you bet that my missus actually got a video of me right now, mate. I lost the plot. I was just going crazy. My dog was looking at me like I was batshit crazy, and I was just losing it, mate. And it was so exciting. And I'll show you the video at some stage, and maybe there's a way I can to get this on there, and you can play this on the show at some stage, or share it on your social medias, whatever the case is. But genuinely losing it, and then obviously things happen. That last foul, it's questionable. You know, there's a play in that third quarter where Chris Goulding blocks Benny Henschel for a dunk attempt. But if you actually watch that, I think there's more body on that particular play than what there was. And when a playoff series is on the line, I think you just give that a no call and let it go to OT and let the two teams play for another 5 minutes. But a great game, a great series, and a great season for the Perth Wildcats. And obviously Melbourne United go on to a grand final series.
Yeah, because there were quite a lot of plays, I think, in the series, and especially in the third game, where it seemed like the refs put their whistle in the pocket because it was, it was equal on both sides. They were both going at each other. They were both very physical, um, but it's like you never want a game to finish on a foul call. To the letter of the law, it was definitely foul, but whether in the context of the game, you want that to happen, especially after that 3-point shot from Wagstaff. And like, how cool to have just him doing it as well. You had the other two guys try and miss, and then it comes to the veteran, the guy that's the heart and soul of the team. Man, like I'm getting goosebumps now, and I remember watching. I was just like, I was going crazy as well. It was unreal.
Oh, it's
Such an
definitely
amazing
unreal.
moment.
It was just amazing. Like I sat there and I was just like, wow, we've got a genuine chance here. And I liked my odds against both Illawarra and Southeast Melbourne Phoenix because I think they can both go a little bit wayward, whereas Melbourne United show signs of waywardness, but really nip it in the bud quite quickly. And that's that professional nature. That's that old school mentality that they've got. But yeah, you talk about some missed calls, mate. There was some missed calls, and I'm just going to throw this one word out there as well. Maybe two words. I don't know. Crucify me in the comments if you must, but goaltend. Goaltend, mate. Goaltend Lee's his new nickname. I hope I never see him in the NBL. I run another podcast as well, which I was on a while ago. And I actually said on this particular show, they were asking me, who would the three imports you'd be for, if the Perth Wildcats could bring in three imports, who would they be? And I said, Bryce Scotton, Christian Doolittle, and Marcus Lee. Well, I can tell you right now, Marcus Lee's gone. I don't want to see him
Out the
anywhere near
door.
Perth.
I have to try and find a job somewhere else, Marcus Lee. All right, let's
100%.
have a turn our focus a little bit to the series that's coming up. You have a fantastic background in and knowledge of the NBL. Where do you think the series is going to be won? What's the difference maker between these two teams?
Yeah, well, I think when you look at this series, it's going to come down to who can defend better because both of these teams can score and have shown the ability all season long. They can score with the best of them. So the Illawarra Hawks lead the league at the moment with the points per game, with 101.4 points per game, which is just incredible. When we look at NBL numbers in the history and everything like that, there's not too many teams in NBL history who have gone on to average over 100 points in a particular game. That is the way the NBL is currently going. Now, you look at Melbourne United, they're fourth in the league with an average of 95.6 points per game. So both relatively good offensive teams, and they both know how to score buckets and be able to find teammates and everything like that as well. But the defensive end of the basketball is where it's really going to come down to it. And both of these teams are very close statistically. The Illawarra Hawks are third in the league right now for opponents' points per game with 91.2 points per game. And the Melbourne United are fifth with 91.4 points per game. So they're both pretty much allowing the exact same amount of points per game. So that's where it's going to come down to it. And I don't know where I really actually look to who's got the difference with players because there's just so many good matchups. Like you're probably expecting a Wani Swakala Bullock to go onto a Chris Goulding. But then who do you throw on a guy like Ian Clark? It's probably going to be a Will Hickey, for example, from the Illawarra Hawks. So that matchup and those two matchups there are super crucial for the Illawarra Hawks' success because both of those guys essentially ruined Perth Wildcats' season in the semi-finals. Now, when you flip it over to the other end, though, is it a Matthew Dellavedova that you throw on a Trey Kell, who's got a little bit more size, a little bit more muscle, and tries to really back you down? I think that's the matchup that Melbourne United will go with. And I think also Illawarra will like that matchup to a certain degree as well. Trey Kell about 4 inches bigger than Matthew Dellavedova. And then obviously the other clear one is Shea Ili on Tyler Harvey. And that one gives me some goosebumps and gets me really excited. But I think when we sort of look at not statistically and everything like that, and we look at a matchup or an area where one team can dominate, it's going to be Sam Froling in terms of dominating the Melbourne United bigs. And Jack White's confidence has been at an all-time low. And the thing also with Illawarra, they've got players like Mason Peatlin, they've got players like Darius Days who can probably take a Jack White out of the game and allow Sam Froling to basically play on a Marcus Lee, and a Robert Lowe as well. So I'm liking that matchup for Sam Froling for a number of different reasons. I think you've seen him against Melbourne United, not only this season, but also last year as well in the semi-finals, which they lost to Melbourne United. He was so big and so crucial for them as well. So I'm looking forward to this series, mate, because you can go a number of different routes and you can try and find the same sort of, advantage here and there. But these two teams are really matched up well.
Yeah, it's so exciting that you're getting two of the top teams. It's not a team coming from the play in, from sixth spot. It's the teams that finished 1 and 2 that have had some pretty good battles already this season. Melbourne inflicted Illawarra's first loss, and it was a pretty damaging loss early on the season at the WEC. They just came out and ambushed them defensively. Exactly what you touched on. They just took out the passing lanes, stopped Illawarra getting to the spots they wanted to get to shoot the ball, and Illawarra had nothing to contend. They just were like, "What do we do? We've been running plays all season long. No one can stop us. Been scoring at will." And then Melbourne come into their house and just put a stop to it, and that scared me, and it was so early in the season, but I was like, if they can't fix this, Illawarra, then they're gonna be in trouble throughout the rest of the season. And they figured out some ways to get around it, and the individual brilliance, as you kind of said there, with Trey Curl and Tyler Harvey and Will Hickey, playing out of his skin. They kind of figured out, okay, well, if they're going to defend us like this, then we have to do this. And then you see, the attack in the paint as well from Sam Froling, who for a lot of the season was leading the league in points in the paint. But you never know what Melbourne's going to come with. They're going to come in there, and they're going to have this completely new set of kind of ideas and ways to muck up Illawarra, because that's the experience. We're on the basketball fix. You and I have spoken about it all year long about the aging roster, but now it's experience, and that experience is important. Illawarra, none of these guys has Kel or Harvey been to a grand final series? Have any of them played in the grand final
Nah,
series?
neither of them.
No.
Nah,
So
Harvey's biggest has been a semi-finals all those years ago when Brian Goorjian was at the helm. But yeah, none of them have made that, I guess, that leap yet into it. So you're bang on, man. And you mentioned that word age there. Well, I'm sorry, but Melbourne United are now going to cancel this show. But it's a genuine concern and a genuine question. We see it all the time. 5-game series and everything like that. It's a really crucial thing with the games in quick succession, and younger legs prevail. They've now played, multiple different games since that. Everyone was speaking about the FIBA break, and I was as well, about that impacting both Illawarra and Melbourne. Well, it probably didn't. It probably impacted them in the early 2 games. But by game 3, they were clearly had that little bit extra grunt in their legs as well, and were able to get over the line of Southeast Melbourne and the Perth Wildcats, respectively. But mate, this is going to be a series. I'm bloody excited. I guess for myself, I hope the Illawarra Hawks win, purely because of yourself, mate, but also the fact of I don't want to see Melbourne United win. But there's a little bit in the back of my mind. It happened last year, and we got kicked out with the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers. When I say we, I speak of the Perth Wildcats. Now, there's always that saying. I always say it sometimes here and there. We lost to the eventual champions. Maybe if we beat the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers, we were the champions last year. So maybe if
yeah,
Melbourne win it this year, maybe we could have been the eventual champions this year as well. So a little bit of
if
thing
not
to
for the
sort of keep in the
goaltend.
piggy bank that I can have over. Yeah, if not for the goaltender, 100%.
But it feels
Bloody
like it's going to
goaltends.
come down to some clutch moments. Like if you compare Illawarra and Adelaide on the scoring end, that they can both score at a very high rate. Illawarra led the league in scoring for the season, but Illawarra led the league in the season, but Perth led the league over the last kind of 5-10 rounds and through the finals in some aspects. So, um, and they kept those games close. Melbourne were forced to also focus on scoring, because in these clutch moments, your guys, your experience or your key guys, they're going to get to the basket and they're going to score. And you just look at that game 3 from Illawarra and the clinic they put on the scoring end. It was unbelievable. So I think the game's going to go down, or I would expect every single game to go down to the wire. I don't know if it's going to go 5 games, because it'll just come down to clutch, and it's okay. Chris Goulding might miss a 3-point shot to win the game in a game 4 where he could send it to game 5 and he misses, and that's it. Or it could come down to a Sam Froling free throw and he misses. You never know.
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted here, mate. I think this does go to 5, just to give a little bit of a throw out here. I think this goes to 5. And the question, and I guess the answer to that as well, is I don't think I've ever seen Chris Goulding as hungry as I have right now. I've watched a lot of his basketball over the years, but there's something about him right now in which there's a genuine anger and a genuine hunger that I haven't probably seen since the season after he was not selected for the Olympic campaign. Actually, that was a couple of years ago, I think. It might have been a Commonwealth game or something like that. He came out and had like an MVP sort of year, and everyone was sort of sat there going, wow, they made a mistake not taking him over there as well. So he has just got that genuine fire in the belly. I was listening to a press conference today. He's talking about how grateful he is to be back in an NBL Championship Series and the opportunity that presents itself and everything like that. He is gone 100% locked in, and I'm looking forward to watching this series, mate. Like I said, I hope Illawarra win. But there's a little bit inside of me that's going to say that Melbourne United are going to walk away game 5 winners. But yeah, I don't know, mate. Last year's series in the grand final was a bit of a weird one because, the away teams won a few games there where not normally that doesn't really happen. Normally if you win one away game, that's the way to winning the series. But it was just an up and down series last year. So are we going to see that again? That's the real question.
It'll be exciting nonetheless. Let's have a quick break, come back and talk some What Do You Reckon? One of our favourite segments here on Ahead of the Game. All right, Joshy, time for What Do You Reckon? I'm a Freo supporter. You're a West Coast supporter. And if Jez had planned this out before before he got the frog stuck in his throat, and from what he could manage to tell me on the phone this morning, we said let's just do this segment anyway because it's pretty fun. And so I got 3 questions I'm going to put to you, and I already kind of know what your answer is going to be, but we debate them a little bit and see where we end up and how we get out of it. So the first one, and it's to do with these two guys here under. What was the question again? Maybe it was a Brownlow. Who wins a Brownlow first between Harley Reid? What do you reckon? Who wins a Brownlow first? Harley Reid or Caleb Serong? You go first.
Oh, mate, this is the question, isn't it? It'd be nice for the Freo Dockers to add something else to the trophy cabinet. It's awfully dusty, and something like a Brownlow obviously only clears a little bit of the cabinet as well. So I guess it'd be nice to have a little 50-cent coin on the trophy cabinet. But I'm going to go with Harley Reid, and it's for one reason and one reason only. I just think there is so much talent in the AFL currently with Caleb Serong contending with just so many great players. I look at Marcus Bontempelli, for example. He just can't win one, and he is arguably the greatest player in the modern era. And it's such a close period and everything like that. There is players in every single team who can win a Brownlow medal. Now, for Caleb Serong to win a Brownlow, you'd have to say that Freo would have to rise into a top 2 team. He'd have to be averaging around 31 disposals per game, just be a complete dominant player. But the thing I have a little bit of a question about is Andrew Brayshaw had a bit of a down year last year. I think when you look across the board statistically and probably the eye test as well, you'd say clearly he had a bit of a down year. But does he have a big year this year? And that once again, contends with not obviously allowing Caleb Serong obviously to take as many votes as he may have at the start of the season. So I think I look at a guy like Harley Reid, he's pure impact. He's 22 and 3 goals when he's at his peak, and that is going to draw the eyes of the umpires, and it obviously gets the crowd going and everything like that, and you focus in on that. And that's the other aspect we've got to look at in this situation. It's all about these umpires and these bloody green maggots half the time. They've got no idea. Give them the stat card after the game. That's what I reckon, to be honest with you, mate. But yeah, I'm going to go Harley Reid to not go on too much. I just think he's a genuine star in the making, and his game style, a la the Dusty Martins, the Christian Petrarcas, that sort of mold, they win awards because it's just sheer eyes on them all the time.
Yeah, well, I can understand where you're coming from, considering the rest of the team is arse. So Harley Reid's going to be getting all the points for his team for the next 15 years. Caleb Serong finished, I think he was like third or fourth in the Brownlow voting last season, and
Yeah,
like I
fourth.
don't think he's necessarily better than a bunch of these other players. I think it could come down to just how the voting works, and then how um, injuries affect the top ranked players. We spoke last week, Jez and I, or a couple episodes ago, about Cripps and his opportunity to take a third Brownlow this season or anytime soon. And as you said, you got Bontempelli, you got Heaney that was up there until he got suspended. There's heaps of guys that are right there, but also there's a heap of guys that either take themselves out of contention every year by getting suspended or by injury. And Harley Reid has a bit of a temper in him. So I reckon he's going to have to toe the line a little bit in regards to suspension so he can give himself a chance to win this award sometime in the future. Going so wrong.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think you're bang on, mate. I like that. I like that point. I think the only thing that you've got to contend with right now is Nick Dacos is probably going to win his one or two over the next 2 or 3 years. I think that's a genuine certainty. He's just been unlucky his first 2 seasons in the AFL. After that, Serong will be well and truly past it. Harley Reid will be flying. The West Coast Eagles will be climbing a ladder, and that's where I sort of see it. Now, obviously, that's a little bit of tongue in cheek right there, but Nick Dacos is just an absolute freak. And if you're to say
But
Caleb
he's a
Serong's in
love
that sort of
child.
category,
He's a love child
he
of
is
the
my love child.
commentators and I
Yeah.
remember watching some games last season and he'd do something and they'd be like, "Oh, Dacos, oh," and then some other,
Yeah.
and it was like something shit, and then another player would do it and like, "That guy's shit. You can't do that on the football field." Like Dacos just did exactly the same thing, and you were blowing smoke up his ass. But anyway,
The only thing
he's a
that
good
I have
player.
like a little bit of a soft spot, yeah, he's a genuine star. And the only reason I have a bit of a soft spot is you don't really see too many 21, 22-year-olds just tearing the league up like Dacos
No.
is at his size. Like he's only
Yeah,
6 foot, I think he is. No, 6'1". He'd be only 85 kilos, if that. And that's probably ringing wet. You're contending with Marcus Bontempelli, who's 195, who's, probably 100 kilos. Paddy Cripps, the exact same ilk. Those guys who are just dominating players. And that's where everyone sees the molded AFL midfielder nowadays. If you're not over 195 and over 95 kilos, are you really an inside midfielder? So he's a genuine superstar, mate, and he puts on a little bit more size, that little bit of extra brute around the contest. He won't be such an outside player. Mate, he could go down as the greatest player of all time. And that's a very, very big comment only 2 years into his career, but it's a genuine possibility for sure.
all right, so we'll have to circle back and give yourself an episode just to have a go, have a bit of a love about Dacos. The second question,
Done.
Josh, what do you reckon? Does Freo win the comp, or does West Coast win the wooden spoon? What happens
Oh, this is
first?
a tough one. I'm
What's
quite
more
warm
likely?
on. Yeah, I'm quite warm on Freo this year, to be fair, mate. Like, I genuinely look at their list and the guys they've brought in. They've brought in a bit of class. So, Shea Bolton's obviously the number one guy who everyone is
Mm.
talking about. And I think he's going to make a huge difference to this team. I think you guys have got so many of the same sort of player, the Caleb Serongs, the Andrew Brayshaws, the Nathan O'Driscolls to a certain degree, the Neil Erasmus, who's a step behind, the Jaguar Ramirez, those sort of guys. They're sort of contest players, but not burst players. Sarongi, probably you could throw half in, half out of that sort of conversation there where, you can give him the ball and he can just break open a game. Well, Shea Bolton's that guy. He's a guy who I've seen at the biggest stages of all time in the AFL tear open games. You talk about the dream time at the G, kicked 3 goals in that second half against the Essendon Bombers and just tore that game apart and won that game by a couple of goals there as well. And that's what Freo have brought into their team. So I'm quite warm on Freo, but do I think that they're going to win the flag? Not necessarily. I still think they're in that conversation. I still think Brisbane are going to be there. I think Geelong are still going to be there. You've got the Sydney Swans who, I know there's a big record going where teams who get smashed in a grand final don't do well in finals, but I still think they're at that sort of peak at the power. Collingwood are coming. So there's a lot of teams at the top. But when I reverse down to the bottom, there ain't too many teams down that bottom of the ladder in which I could say could genuinely be a wooden spooner. So I really think it's probably West Coast, Richmond, and I don't know. There's a couple other teams, like I think North Melbourne are going to bounce up this year. You know, you've got the Gold
Mm.
Coast Suns who could fly in, fly out. You've got the Adelaide Crows, you know, teams like that. So I'm going to lock in, mate, on the what do you reckon? I'm going to go that the West Coast Eagles will more likely win a wooden spoon and the Freo Dockers to win the premiership.
Wow. All right. I'm the opposite. I think West Coast are too good to win a wooden spoon compared. I think they're a lot further along in their rebuild than what Richmond are. And I think there's opportunity for a team like, yeah, maybe St Kilda or Adelaide or one of those ones that are kind of in the middle of the bottom and they just blow it all up and start again and they just crash before because I think as I said, West Coast are in a spot now. They have the guy to build around, new coach coming in. They're setting themselves up for the future. I think they're maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of these other teams that are pretty crap. So I think it's more that West Coast are moving away from the wooden spoon rather than Freo moving up to the flag. And I don't want to jinx them by saying they're going to win the flag either. So uh,
Smart
have
thing
to,
to
I
do.
guess. All right. The last question on what do you reckon? Um, and this one is around the coaching. If I don't know how to really word the question in a succinct manner, but there's been pressure on JL from Freo that his job might be under fire, but now he's been moved to a different contract as a staff member more than a coach that's been based on performance. I don't know how that works, but and then West Coast obviously new coach. What do you reckon? Do Freo fire their coach before West Coast figure out if they can't produce this season to their expectation? Do they get rid of their coach and start again, or what do you reckon?
Mate, I was hoping you'd ask some sort of question about Andrew McQualter at the West Coast Eagles because I'm genuinely hot on McQualter. I think his game style is fun. It's exciting. It's the modern football. It's, you know, you've got your small forwards, you've got your key forwards, you have a fast playing midfield. You know, like some of the players that we've picked up at West Coast before I get into answering the question, Liam Baker, Malachi Champion, you know, you've got Jack Graham coming in, you've got Tommy Gross, you've got Matt Owies, and you've got Job Shanahan. You know, guys like that who are going to be able to be built over a long period of time, whether it be inside midfielders, halfback flankers, or especially the modern football with the small forwards, because they've already got two major key forwards to build around, Jake Waterman and Oscar Allen. That is your future for the next 10 years. That is an absolute lethal combination. Jake Waterman surprised me last year and really just turned the clock around and had an outstanding season. So I think McQualter's got a really good career ahead of him in terms of coaching. He's had some amazing coaches around him. You know, Damien Hardwick is obviously the most notable, who is just an absolute guru when it comes to AFL coaching. So I've got no real questions on Andrew McQualter. I know it's very early to say that when you haven't really seen a proper game just yet, but a couple of preseason things I've seen, some of the press conferences that he's been talking about their new game style, very excited. Now, Justin Langer, Jesus Christ, there we go, here we go. JL it's a bit more of an interesting one. We're talking cricket now. Cricket's in the back of my mind after Australia's disappointing loss a couple of days ago. But
Disgusting.
JL, I am a little bit worried about JL, and there's a couple of reasons why. Because I think JL is the coach who you bring in after you've sacked a coach after like a grand final or a good run. So I think that's the sort of the coach JL is. I don't think he's a guy who gets a list in which is ready to win and he wins. He's no Chris Scott. He's no, Chris Fagan. Chris Fagan's probably the better example there. He got that list when they were kind of getting good to go and everything like that and rebuilt and then won. I don't think he can do that. I think he gets it to a year or two away from a grand final or a premiership and he has to hand the reins over to somebody else. So I genuinely think if Freo have a disappointing year this year, it's time to pack up shop, sack him, get rid of him, and bring in someone with a little bit of ilk. Now, Luke Beveridge is a name who I think of straight away. He's the guy who at Western Bulldogs did the exact same thing as what Freo need to do right now. The list is good. It's building in the right direction. They just need a couple of tinkering things to the game plan and you win a flag. So, yeah, I think this is genuinely the conversation. But again, the back of my mind, something's telling me right now, it doesn't matter with Fremantle. It doesn't matter. They just accept mediocrity. It's been happening for so many years now. And I just genuinely think, they probably had to sack JL 2 years ago, but they've locked themselves in now and they keep telling themselves, he's a good coach. We're going to win. Our list is building. building and all that sort of stuff. Well, no one's performing. So yeah, it's disappointing, mate. What are your thoughts? I got a question for you after this, to be honest with you, quickly about Freo.
Yeah, no, I think it's the same. I think GL's more in the firing line. McAlter's got a 3-year contract, and I think West Coast have to be extremely bad for them to be like, "Oh, mate, this is the wrong way. We can't build around this." So yeah, short and sweet. JL's out if Freo don't get to a prelim.
No, I love it. Luke Jackson, mate. I want to ask you this quickly. It's been a bit of an interesting one. Now, I don't think you can believe too much of what Sam McClure says. He said West Coast won't take Harley Reid, pick one, and these slicked back hair looking like an absolute moron. But he said something quite interesting to me about Luke Jackson. He said that potentially he may be traded this offseason. Now, obviously, the Chad Warner Cup between the West Coast and Freo, we'll call that the Derby for this year. I think that's probably the best way of saying it. But Luke Jackson may be on the cards of potentially a trade, which would obviously allow Chad Warner to come home with some draft capital or a player or something of that ilk. What are your thoughts on that, mate? Because I got quite a few on that quickly.
Yeah, no, I think Jackson's been really integral part of the team, considering how much Sean Darcy's been injured. Whether he's moved the needle, he's very important, and they would have been a lot worse off if they didn't have him. But has he made the team significantly better? Probably not, but they would have been a lot worse off without him. I really like him as a player, and I think he's developed in the short time that he's been at Freo, and his game's gotten better. Whether or not Chad Warner really lifts the needle for Freo, given the talent they already have on their roster in those positions, I don't know. It's so hard. That's why I'm not a list manager of the AFL.
Yeah, I think if you're being fair with yourself and you're being open and honest with yourself as a Freo supporter, I don't think you can sit here and say that he's had the chance to show what he can do. He's a
No.
genuine number one ruckman for any team in the AFL. And we saw what he did in that third quarter of the grand final in 2021 as like a 21 or 22-year-old. He tore the game apart. And that's what I sort of see him doing. And you got the big baby who spends every second week in Fremantle trying to pick up a chick over here in WA and not focusing on his rehab. And that's his biggest problem. He's got old Shagger's hip, to be fair, mate. But, you've got a few things going on with Freo in which I just think, it's time to now start being serious. Is Luke Jackson your ruckman, or are you going to waste him as a third tall forward in your Fremantle's forward line? Now, if you think he's just a backup ruck and a 20 or 30% ruckman, get rid of him and get as much draft capital as you possibly can to potentially bring over a Chad Warner. Because a Chad Warner, he's a game winner. We saw it for Sydney in those semi-finals and prelims. That fourth quarter, every time they played, 11-2, 13-2, 11-1, everything like that. He's a genuine game winner. So you got to start being smart. And this is where I come back to it, mate. Are they playing for Brownlow medals? Are they playing for premiership cups?
Yeah, like you said, it's a team of mediocrity, and it has been, and probably always will be. So you never
The anchor's still
completely
pulling them down, mate.
exactly. You're never completely disappointed, but you're never happy either. All right, that's it. Thanks for today, mate. It's great having you on, chatting some sports. We'll get you back on a little bit later on in the season, talk some more footy once that's going, and probably Jez, a bit like Sean Darcy, out every second week with some sort of ailment. But yeah, he'll be all right.
I don't think you'll have Shagger's hit though, poor Jez. But no, mate, thanks very much for having me on. It's been a good laugh. I've really enjoyed it.
Cheers. Don't forget, Tuck Sport Takes, Sports Pez Jez, he's not here. Get over to the Basketball Fix as well. Josh runs that. We're part of it as well. It's good fun. A lot of stuff about the NBL. The Basketball Fix podcast on Instagram is the best place to check that out. Don't forget as well, game previews, betting stuff, bets.com.au. Best place for that. Have a good one. Stay with us. Keep mucking up this this outro. Got to get Jez to say it last week, and I cut him off by putting the end credits. It's something will keep you ahead of the game. Bye bye.